I was once a sniper, precise and lethal. But now, I've become a hitman specializing in cheating spouses. My mission was to end betrayal, but when I looked through the scope, I was shocked to see the woman it waned that my target was my beloved wife. Sophia. Growing up in a small rural town, I was always the quiet observant one. The vast open fields and the endless horizon offered plenty of time to think, dream and develop a sharp eye as a teenager. I spent countless hours with my father's old hunting rifle, aiming at tin cans and small game. It wasn't just a pause time. It became an obsession to perfect each shot, to understand the subtleties of wind, distance and timing. When I joined the military, those skills found purpose. As a sniper, I honed my abilities to near perfection. The hours of lying in wait, patient and invisible, taught me not just the art of the shot, but the discipline of focus. But life outside the military wasn't kind. The transition from soldier to civilian was a harsh one, especially with the burden of a dishonorable discharge hanging over my head. A single lapse in judgment, a punch thrown in anger at the wrong superior cost me everything I had built, lost and aimless, until an unconventional opportunity presented itself. An outlet for my skills and a way to carve out a new life, even if it meant walking the shadows. These moments bring me back to the desert, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. As my crosshairs currently rest on a figure framed perfectly in the distance, I am not a terrorist nor a common criminal. Yet, here in this moment, I am the villain. My target is a middle-aged banker perspiring heavily, despite the air conditioning, oblivious to the world outside his hotel room. He lies entangled with a younger colleague. My mission to ensure his story ends. Tonight, the contract came through. Encrypted channels. The payment settled in cryptocurrency. I don't know who hired me, nor do I care. By the time the authorities piece together what happened, I'll be nothing but a ghost leaving behind no traceable steps. I keep watching through the scope. I'm not a voyeur, but I need the right moment to fire for various reasons. I can't take the shot while they're still in the act. Usually when the guy finishes, he either rolls over or gets up, and that's my cue. I adjust the scope slightly, scanning the visible part of the room. Through the window, aside from the couple, there's no one there. I glance at her. She's a beauty. The contract specifies. She's not to be injured, not physically. At least I can't predict how witnessing her lover's head explode as he heads to the bathroom might scar her mentally. I look away. Brief lie to stay alert. Getting too focused on the target could put me in danger. I'm here alone without backup or cover, so I have to ensure my position is secure. I'm on a rooftop across the street from the hotel where the banker's staying. I return to the scope. They're close to finishing. I shift my position and confirm nothing in the environment has changed. Then it happens. He arches, cries out. In climax, trembles a few times, and then goes still as expected. He gets off her and heads to the bathroom. I complete the task with precision, disappearing into the night before anyone notices. By the time law enforcement arrives, I'm miles away. I stash my gear in one of several storage units I maintain under different names, all prepaid in cash on the drive home. I reflect once again on how I ended up in this line of work. How did I become a hitman specializing almost exclusively in cheating spouses? The shooting part is simple. I've always been good with a rifle growing up on a farm. I hunted regularly and developed an knack for precision, especially with rifles. I could make shots. No one else could almost instinctively. When I enlisted in the Marines and went to sniper school, I learned the technical aspects: trajectory, wind resistance, ballistics. But I rarely needed those skills. I could make shots by instinct that even seasoned snipers struggled to replicate with their calculations. I likely would have had a stellar career in the Marine Corps. But then something happened that changed everything and set me on this path. A cheating spouse. Isabel was a petite, dark-haired, French girl I met in a bar while on leave. She was lively, attractive and alluring in ways that stirred all kinds of thoughts. She spent the evening with my best friend, Daniel, and me dancing with each of us in turn. By the end of the night, it was clear there was a spark between her and Daniel with a forced smile. I did the only thing a good friend could. Good luck, Daniel. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. With a grin that didn't reach my eyes, then headed back to BA's alone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wherever they went out, they were inseparable. I often found myself the third wheel, or she'd bring along a friend to keep me company. After 3 months, Daniel showed me the engagement ring. He bought her. Wow, Daniel. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Inspecting the sizable diamond that's a rock. Are you sure you're ready for this one? You know. He laughed, striking a mock-wise pose. I'm not letting her get away. The look Isabel gave when Daniel proposed that night stuck with me. I expected excitement, maybe joy, but for a moment, there was a flash of calculation in her eyes before she put on the appropriate reaction. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin his moment, but I couldn't shake my unease as best man. I organized the bachelor party, and let me tell you, it was legendary. Half the platoon was there and the night was a blur of drinks, laughter and chaos. We had to carry Daniel back to his bunk, and he remembered almost nothing. The next day, naturally, there were dancers. What's a bachelor party without them? But I ensured Daniel stayed out of trouble before planning the party. I had even spoken to Isabel about boundaries. If she'd said, no answers, I'd hold the guys. Then there wouldn't have been any. I didn't want Daniel divorced before he was married. The wedding was small, attended by her parents, by a few friends and some guys from our platoon. As I mentioned before, I was the best man. 2 months later, we were deployed to the desert for a 3-month tour. I'll never forget that patrol. Our mission was to search a village believed to harbor rebels. My spotter and I had scouted a vantage point where I could provide overwatch for the team. It wasn't perfect. There were areas I couldn't see, but it was the best option available. Daniel had been acting strange all day, unusually anxious and short-tempered, even with me, which was out of character. What's wrong with you? Concerned about his erratic behavior. Nothing, he replied with a forced grin. Just ditching to get going. That was the last conversation I ever had with Daniel. He didn't come back from that patrol. I didn't see what happened since his position was out of my sight line, but his team reported that when they encountered the enemy, Daniel stood up, shouted something like, "Go, you fools," and charged, firing his M16 from the hip, like he was in a movie. He didn't make it 3N before they cut him down as his best friend. It fell to me to gather his belongings for shipment back to the US. That's when I found the letter. Dear Daniel, I know this is the coward's way, but I have to tell you that I've been seeing someone else and we've fallen in love. I'm leaving you so we can be together. I want you to know, I truly loved you, but the time apart made me realize I'm not in love with you. Deserve better. It's best if we end things, so you can find someone who loves you, the way you deserve. Please, don't hate me. Richard says you have a month left on tour, so by the time you return, I'll be moving out. I won't ask for anything in the divorce, and hope we can remain friends. If you can't, forgive me. Best wishes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Damn witch, I yelled. After reading it, everything about Daniel's behavior suddenly made sense, and I knew there had to be consequences. My tour was cut short, so I could escort Daniel's body back to the house. When we unloaded the coffin, Isabel approached it, tears streaming down her face. She placed her hand on the casket. But I stopped her. Don't you dare. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nolban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice called. What do you mean? Shocked. You betrayed him. Stepping between her and the coffin, she recoiled, stunned, and that's when I noticed the officer with her. It was Colonel Richard Bennett. My stomach churned as I saw him draping arm over her shoulders in a gesture of comfort. What the hell? I snapped, unable to hold back my rage. Are you the one she left him for stand down? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nolban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The colonel ordered, his tone commanding. How dare you? I shot back. You sent it a Richard letter to an active duty soldier right before a mission. What did you think would happen? That's enough. I couldn't contain myself. My first punch landed squarely on his throat, dropping him to his knees. A kick to the groin sent him to the ground, and I followed with 4 strikes to his face. Before security restrained me, my satisfaction came later, when we were both court-martialed him for misconduct, me for attacking a superior officer. He was discharged without pension, and I spent a year in military prison, leaving with a dishonorable discharge. After my release, I couldn't move on. It took me a year to track down Gabriel, who had relocated to Canada and was living with a French-Canadian businessman. I didn't know what happened to Colonel Bennett. He disappeared from the picture. I consider it simply shooting her from a distance. It would have been easy. No security, no cameras, but she wouldn't understand why. And I wanted it to be personal. I wanted her to know who and why she made it easy. One night, she was at a dance with friends. True to form, she was cheating the guy. Kissing her wasn't her businessman. I watched from the bar as he whispered in her ear and they moved toward the exit. Circling the building and saw them heading to an SUV in the parking lot. I waited by my car to see if they drive off. But when he opened the back door, I knew it was happening right there. Quietly, I approached. As I got closer, I saw Isabel bent over the back seat with the guy behind her. I didn't want to eliminate him. I had no issue with him. I quickly strangled him, until he collapsed unconscious on the ground. It took her a few seconds to realize the movement had stopped when she turned. She saw me standing there, pointing my Glock 9 at her. Eyes widened in recognition, and she opened her mouth to speak. I cut her off. Daniel says, hi, which I acted swiftly, ensuring the mission's completion before stepping away and noticed before the sound of shot fire reached the bar. I was already gone, crossing back into the United States. In under 4 hours avenging, Daniel gave me an idea. Surely many people were dealing with infidelity at this very moment. Some might seek reconciliation. Others would opt for divorce. But there would always be those seeking a more permanent solution, and I had the skills to provide it. That's how I became a hitman specializing in cheating spouses. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nolban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's an easy job. These are ordinary people unaware. They've been marked in without any personal security. After about 4 years in the business, earning significant money, I met Sophia. She was the finance manager at a car dealership. I went to buy a new car. Bright, sharp and a captivating conversationalist. She was stunning. Just under 5', all in heels with legs that seemed endless, jet black hair and a figure that could stop traffic from the start. There was chemistry. While discussing financing, I decided to test the waters. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? She smiled, her eyes lighting up. I'd love that. In less than 30 minutes, we had a date. Planned a year and a half later after a whirlwind courtship. Sophia and I were married in a lavish ceremony with over 2 guests, including her family and friends, my parents and a handful of military buddies to the world. And to Sophia, I was a successful financial manager working from home. I explained my frequent trips as client meetings, which made for a perfect cover. Life with Sophia was great. She supported my finance work. Even when I traveled, she always welcomed me home, passionately, and our closeness was frequent and enthusiastic, sometimes daily. Sophia rarely went out alone, and always maintained proper boundaries when interacting with others. Even at dances, I had no doubt she loved me, just as I loved her. My contracts came through the dark web. I never met clients in person, only communicated online and required undeniable proof of infidelity. Clients never knew whether a target would be eliminated. Payments were made to a virtual account, released only upon completion of the contract. If I couldn't fulfill a job, I refunded the money, though that hadn't happened yet, with no personal connections to the sufferers in payment and untraceable cryptocurrency. Law enforcement never came close to me. Most of my targets were men, about 10 to 1. When men cheated, women often wanted them dead. When women cheated, their partners usually wanted the other man eliminated. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for her unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There were exceptions, but I had no moral qualms about the work. Clients paid well, and I believe cheaters got what they deserved. Life continued smoothly. After 3 years of marriage, Sophia and I had our first child, followed by another. Just 18 months later, we provided a stable home, and our kids grew up, well, eventually attending college, fully paid for. As the kids left home, Sophia, feeling the emptiness, returned to work at the dealership. Meanwhile, I worked mostly from home, with occasional business trips. I decided it was time to retire. 1 or 2 more contracts would fully fund my pension. I was tired of the life. Scanning the job board I used for contract, I saw 2 available jobs, one nearby, and another across the country. I chose the local contract, thinking it would be my penultimate job. The target was a man named Thomas Evans. The attached dossier was detailed. Thomas was a group insurance salesman covering 3 states, including mine, and traveled frequently. He was married to Janine with 3 young children, Cole, Mary and Shalbon. Reports from private investigators included evidence of him having affairs with 4 different women. He was currently staying at a hotel less than 50 miles away for a week. The dossier listed the hotel and even his room number. He often traveled with a woman who wasn't his wife. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for her unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was unclear if he had company this time. The photos in the dossier were typical pictures of Thomas, his wife and his kid. I always found it photos of the children were included, but they always were. The research was thorough. I googled the hotel, confirming Thomas's room was on the 5th floor. A quick check of Google Earth showed an unfinished building down the block from its upper floors. I'd have a clear line of sight into Thomas's room as the surrounding buildings were only 3 stories high that evening. I informed Sophia of my upcoming business trip. I have to leave for a trip next week. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll head out. Monday morning, I'll be back by Thursday. Maybe Friday. Sophia glanced up from her book. I thought you were done with those trips, she remarked, her tone curious rather than accusatory. This might be the last one. But if this doesn't pan out, there could be one more. She nodded, then smiled. That means we'll have the whole weekend together. We didn't spend the entire weekend in bed, but it was a close call after a fantastic Friday night. We spent Saturday running errands before enjoying dinner at a favorite restaurant. The rest of Saturday night, and most of Sunday, were dedicated to each other in bed. On Monday morning, I left the house, drove to the airport and parked my car from there. I walked about a mile to a nearby warehouse where I kept an inconspicuous car for jobs like this. A grey Toyota said, and that was utterly forgettable. Registered under a fake kid, strong enough to pass police scrutiny. It was perfect for my purposes. I positioned myself on the 7th floor of an abandoned construction site. My rifle trained on the target's hotel room window. Just after noon, the man entered the room. He fiddled with his belongings for a while, made a brief phone call, and then left. I didn't follow him. I knew he'd return, so I settled into wait with the site. Abandoned. I wasn't worried about being discovered. He returned after 6 p.m. and visibly hurried. He went straight to the bathroom to shower, then walked back to the bedroom. Nothing unusual, but his physique didn't explain his apt to women. Thin and uninspiring. It was clear his charm must lie in his words, rather than his body. After about 30 minutes, he dressed and left again. I ate some food and waited, confident he'd return with a companion. I planned to snap photographic proof of his infidelity before putting a bullet in his skull. The contract was silent on the woman's fate, so I'd spare her. I didn't know if she was a cheater or just a lonely woman, drawn to this man. Without that knowledge, I had no reason to liquidate her. It was past midnight and the lights in the room flicked on again. Looking through my scope, I saw the target enter with a tall, dark-haired woman. She pinned him against the door and dropped to her knees almost immediately from my angle. A couple of floors above, I could only see his torso down as her back was. I wasn't concerned. They'd eventually move further into the room. Still entangled, they undressed as they moved toward the bed. By the time they reached it, she was down to her underwear and he was completely without clothes. He pushed her onto the bed. As she reclined from my vantage point, I could see only the tops of their bodies. Then she tilted her head back, and I adjusted my aim to focus on her face. In that moment, I had to summon all my self-control to stop myself from pulling the trigger. I activated the camera linked to my scope and captured a digital photo for the next 3 hours. I recorded photos and videos. As the couple had ZX, they didn't bother closing the blinds or turning off the lights, making themselves visible to anyone on the street. Finally exhausted, they had one last session before falling asleep. When the lights went out, I leaned back, my heart racing, and my mind in chaos. I opened the first photo I'd taken through the scope. The woman was arching her back, her eyes wide with pleasure. I zoomed in, studying her face. Enthusiasm in familiar eyes. My blood ran cold. The eyes staring back at me belonged to Sophia, my wife. Thoughts flooded my mind. I couldn't proceed with the hit. One of the key elements of my work was avoiding any connection to the sufferers or their partners. If I eliminated them, now I'd be the first person the police questioned. My alibi wouldn't hold under scrutiny. Beyond that, I wasn't ready to decide what to do about Sophia. The anger surging through me made it tempting to shoot her on impulse, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to think about her, about our children, and about the consequences of my actions. Whatever choice I made, I'd have to live with it for the rest of my life. The thought crossed my mind. If I abandoned the contract, someone else might take it and be less discerning about sparing the idiot's partner. I also had to consider whether this was a setup. Could someone have orchestrated this situation for me to catch Sophia cheating? Just to mess with me? I doubted it was law enforcement. They wouldn't risk putting someone in my sights. Knowing, I could act immediately, but it could be someone connected to past contract seeking or vain. No, I had to finish the job, but it had to look random or natural to avoid any follow-up from the authorities. Sophia could wait. I packed up my gear and stored it in my designated storage unit. I wouldn't be using it for this job. While there, I grabbed some extra electronic equipment back at the hotel. I found their cars and discreetly placed GPS trackers on both the next morning. After they left, Sophia returned to my house, and he went about his usual activities. I used the opportunity to enter his hotel room with an electronic keycard. A thorough search revealed nothing surprising, just some blood pressure meds and Viagra in his luggage. I installed several hidden cameras around the room. I had for days to finish the contract, And since I told Sophia I wouldn't be back until Thursday or Friday, there was no need for frequent communication. I booked a room at the hotel using one of my fake its. Staying legally would simplify things. I also noticed the hotel's surveillance cameras were only at the entrance and in the elevators. None in the stairwells or hallways near the rooms. Throughout the day, I tracked their movements while making preparations. Sophia went to work, hit the gym and then returned home later. The man's tracker indicated he was heading toward my house. I silently fumed, vowing that if she let him inside, I'd eliminated them both without caring about the consequences. Thankfully, he stopped about 5 blocks away, just after 600. In the evening, Sophia called Baby, I missed you. Last night, I thought you'd call. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, parts out thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I fell asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up, it was late, she said smoothly without hesitation. I thought so. That's why I didn't bother you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Clenching my fist. This was the first time I knew. Sophia had lied to me. There had likely been others, but I hadn't caught them until now. How's the meeting going? Sweetly, an unexpected complication came up. Someone showed up at the meeting, who raised some questions. I think I can close the deal, but it might take a little longer than expected once it's done though. No more business trips. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Forcing my voice to remain calm. So you'll be back Friday instead of Thursday. Her tone, sounding almost pleased. You don't sound disappointed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My words, dripping with sarcasm. Oh no, not at all, she replied warmly. I'm just happy. This is your last trip. If it takes one extra day, it's worth it. What are your plans tonight? Keeping her talking. I just got back from the gym, so I'm going to relax in front of the TV, she said casually. Then I'll go to bed early. Well, remember what my mom always said. If you're not in bed by 11, you have to go home. I joked. She laughed. Softly. I'll call you tomorrow night. I miss you. Good night. I ended the call without saying more. She didn't seem to notice. Next call was to a chemist, friend who sometimes supplied me when I needed unconventional methods. I told him I needed something that would mimic a heart attack. By the time I returned to the hotel after picking it up, the target was back in his room. I accessed the camera feed and saw him on the phone. I.J. Wes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Making me win. Sophia hated when people shortened her name, yet she let this guy call her Jules. It was a small thing, but it's done. No, I just got back. Give me an hour. And I'll meet you downstairs. Say 730. I'll make you forget all about that. Poor hole you married, he added with a smug grin, after listening to her response. No, Sophia. I didn't mean to upset you. Be baby. Please. At his phone in frustration. Crap. I smiled grimly. It seemed his night of fun had hit his nag moments later. My phone rang. It was Sophia. Hi, baby. How are you? I'm fine. What's up? Masking my irritation. Nothing, she replied quickly. I just realized I didn't say I love you earlier, and I wanted to make sure you knew. Her voice sounded slightly off, almost upset. Are you okay? I asked cautiously. You sound different. I'm fine, she insisted too quickly. I just miss you. That's all. Her phone beeped, signaling another call. Glancing at the camera feed, I saw Thomas on his phone again. It was clear. He was calling her. Why don't we talk for a bit? I suggested. It'll almost feel like I'm there. I waited to see what choice she would make. Keep talking to me, or return to her lover for more sweet talk. End another night together. She chose coolly. No, I'm just being silly, she said quickly. Enthusiasm. Listen, my mom's trying to call. I just wanted to tell you, I love you. Good night. Before I could stop myself, the words escaped. Good night, Jules. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Coldly, I hung up, wondering if she had caught the icy tone in my voice. Back in Thomas's room, his phone rang again. His grin returned as he answered. Hi, baby. Yes, I'm so sorry. I know you hate it when I say bad things about him. It's just my insecurity. I just want to be the best lover for you, and make you feel as good as you make me feel. Nodding. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tomorrow, then. How about dinner at Archie? Shall I book a table for 7? Yes. Sophia. Good night. Hearing him. Tell her. I love you. Sent another wave of fury through me. Was she in love with this man? Or was she just pairing the words? I'd find out soon enough. Shortly after he called room service to order food and beers. It was time for me to act. I waited for the food to arrive, and for the staff to leave. Once Thomas had started eating, I knocked on his door, standing to the side so he couldn't see me through the people. Not the thought he'd check. When he opened the door, his face twisted in shock as he stared down the barrel of my silenced Glock. Good evening, Thomas. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Pleasantly mind if I come in? His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, forcing him to retreat as the door closed behind me. What do you want? I have about 5 in my wallet. You can take it. I chuckled softly. So rude. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shaking my head. I just want to have a nice chat. What chat about? What he asked. Obvious. Well, you see, my employer. Someone you're quite familiar with. Want some answers? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your wife, Janine, has a few questions. I already have plenty of information, but there are gaps to fill. If you lie to me, I'll find out and I'll shoot you. Thomas turned pale. I don't relax. I interrupted. I don't want to shoot you. Sounds like too much effort, and your wife would prefer to ruin you finnin. Potentially, rather than have you dead. She thinks your kids might miss you if you were gone. But she wants the truth, and make no mistake. She'll find every woman you've been with, and let their husbands know if you tell me everything now. I'll leave this room without turning it into a crime scene. Sound fair? I grabbed one of the beers he'd ordered, opened it and took a sip. Is this the best they've got here? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wrinkling my nose, Thomas's eyes darted toward the door, but hopelessness settled on his face. If I tell you everything, you won't shoot me? He asked cautiously. I won't shoot you. I confirmed I leave and you can move on with your life. But I suggest you call your wife after I'm gone. Maybe if you gravel, she'll forgive you for the kids' sake. Thomas slumped into a chair. What do you want to know? There are 4 women I already know about. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Listing their names and where they lived. His stunned expression confirmed my information was accurate. But I need more details about one. Sophia. She works at a car dealership. Tell me everything. How you met. How long it's been, the whole story. Thomas hesitated, But the realization that he had no choice set in. He began, haltingly. I met Sophia 4 months ago. I went to her dealership to sell insurance. And we hit it off. She's gorgeous, charming, and has an amazing body. I couldn't resist. I asked her to lunch. And she said, yes. He swallowed nervously and continued after lunch. She surprised me by suggesting dinner that same night. She told me her husband was out of town that evening. We ended up at my hotel. She gave me a night I'll never forget. I grimaced, but motioned for him to go on. How often did you see her? 9 times, he admitted. Wherever her husband was away. She'd call if I could make it. I'd come here. I even cancelled dates with my other girlfriends. She's better than any of them. He grinned, briefly, lost in the memory, but sobered when he saw my expression nervously. He finished his beer and glanced at the minibar. Can I have another? He asked hesitantly. I nodded. Help yourself. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But keep this civil. It'd be unfortunate if I had to shoot you over a misunderstanding. Thomas chuckled, nervously, grabbed another beer and sat back down. I pressed further. So Sophia was calling the shots. Do you think she's done this before? Probably she's too skilled to be new at it. But she never let me insult her husband. She wouldn't even tell me his name once I called him Anne. A hole and she ripped into me. That's why she didn't meet me at night. She's still mad. Interesting that she's so protective of him while doing what she's doing. Thomas laughed. She's got this strange split personality. One part is the devoted wife who won't tolerate anyone disrespecting her husband. The other part is the woman who comes to me for fun. It's like she doesn't see any contradiction. I leaned back, processing his words. I'm not sure her husband would share that perspective. I said quietly. Suddenly, Thomas winced and clutched his chest. You okay? Just indigestion. Probably the beer. He rubbed his left arm abstinently, then began choking. His face turned purple and sweat poured down his forehead as he clutched his chest with both hands. Help me. Panic in his eyes. I locked eyes with him. Thomas. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Conley. Look at me. He raised his head, weakly, barely able to breathe. You should have stayed away from Sophia. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Coldly, shook my wife. His eyes widened in shock. Just before rolling back into his head, he slumped over, motionless. I knew he was gone. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It would take another 10 to 15 minutes for his body to completely shut down. I used that time to carefully remove any evidence of my presence. I turned on the TV at a low volume and arranged the food in front of it. When his body was found, it would look like he died of a heart attack while eating dinner and watching TV. Given his blood pressure medication and Viagra, I was confident an autopsy would attribute his end of life to natural causes. I checked his body one last time to confirm he was dead, then ensured the hallway was clear. Hanging a do not disturb sign on his door. I returned to my room. The next day, Sophia called around 5:30 p.m. Hey, baby, how was your day? To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Great. One issue and I'm confident I can settle the last one soon. I had an idea since this is my last business trip. How about we fly to Mexico for the weekend? I can pick you up at the airport and we can celebrate. Maybe even extend it into a vacation. You probably need a break. And it's not like you really need that job. Sophia laughed. That sounds amazing. I'll talk to Barry tomorrow and see what he says. I'll call you tomorrow night so we can book tickets. Perfect. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What's your plan for tonight? Same as always, she replied. I have some work to finish, and then I'll watch a show. I glanced at the clock, knowing she thought she had a dinner reservation at 7, and it would take at least 40 minutes for her to get there. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She said casually, I'll talk to you tomorrow. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Enjoy your dinner and treat. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Bye, baby. Love you. I hung up without responding at 8:30. There was a knock on Thomas's door. Since I'd placed the Do Not Disturb sign, housekeeping hadn't entered the room. I figured Sophia had gone to the restaurant, waited, and then come to find out why Thomas was late after 20 minutes. The knock came again. The door squeaked as a hotel employee entered, followed by Sophia. They found Thomas slumped over his dinner and nodding. The employee rushed to him, while Sophia stood in the doorway. Is he dead? Flatly, the employee checked his pulse, but didn't need to. Thomas was clearly gone. Yes, dead without a word. Sophia turned and left. The hotel worker realized she was gone. She was already in the elevator, leaving the hotel. The police and paramedics arrived shortly after. Upon searching the room, they found his medications and concluded he'd suffered a fatal heart attack. His medical history and the circumstances of his end of life supported the conclusion. When questioned, the hotel worker explained that a woman had asked him to check on the man. He admitted seeing her visit earlier in the week, though he didn't know her identity. The worker mentioned that Thomas often entertained female guests who he suspected were escorts, but never reported because Thomas tipped generously. Once the investigation wrapped up, I retrieved my surveillance equipment, packed it away, and checked out of the hotel early. The next morning, I returned to the parking lot and removed the GPS tracker from Thomas's car. Before leaving on Saturday morning, I picked up Sophia from the airport and we headed to the villa I had rented. She squealed with delight as she looked around, especially when she saw the private pool with sun loungers. I'm going to change. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Can we talk for a minute first? Duels. She stopped and turned toward me. You know, I don't like it when you call me that. Why not? You didn't seem to mind when Thomas called you that. Her face turned pale, but she tried to play it off. Who's Thomas? Do you know him? Thomas, the insurance agent. The one you've been sleeping with for the past 4 months. The one you were with Monday night when you told me you were too tired and fell asleep without calling. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I don't know what you're talking about or what you think you've heard. She started. I placed a photo on the table between us, the one I had taken through the scope of her, lying on her back, eyes wide. She sank into a chair. Oh, she said softly. Oh, is that all you have to say? Incredulous. She shrugged. What do you want me to say? How long? I asked. She looked me in the eye. About 4 months. And I assume he wasn't the first. I said coldly. Do we really have to do this? Do what? Confront the truth about my cheating wife. I shot back insults. Really, can't you come up with something more original before you start? To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There is something you need to understand. Like, what? Why you did this? I was about to suggest she can control herself, but I stopped and let her speak. She began hesitantly. We've been married a long time, haven't we? I nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. How many times a week do you think we have Z on average? Her voice measured, but pointed. I paused to consider her question. Well, it slowed down a bit with age, I admitted. But before I could elaborate, she interrupted. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Firmly at first, we were like teenagers every day, sometimes multiple times. When that phase passed, we still had ZX at least every other day, sometimes more. And ZX was incredible. You are the best lover I've ever had. But then you started going on business trips sometimes for weeks at a time. I was used to having ZX almost daily, and suddenly, you expected me to go without it for long stretches. She exhaled deeply, steadying herself. One night when you were away, I decided to relieve some tension by going to the gym. But instead, I ended up going home with someone. It wasn't planned, but it satisfied the need you had awakened in me the next day. I felt awful. You'd find out that you'd be hurt that you might leave me. When you came back, I practically attacked you and in bed every day. For a week, trying to erase my guilt and make it up to you for something you didn't know had happened. But deep down, I knew it would happen again the next time you left, and it did. She looked down briefly before meeting my eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I had to accept it as the new normal, but I created some rules for myself. Her voice softened as she explained. I never did it when you were home, not because I thought you'd catch me, but because I didn't need anyone else when you were here. You've always been my first and best lover. Second, I never brought anyone into our house. I wouldn't disrespect you like that. And I never allowed anyone to speak badly about you. If a man even hinted at disrespecting you, I ended things immediately. Third, I got tested regularly for STDs, not because I was afraid of getting caught, but because I refused to put you at risk. I also made sure I couldn't get pregnant. I used an IUD and birth control implants. When we decided to have children, I stopped all of that. If you want proof, I have DNA tests for the kids. She leaned closer, her voice trembling slightly, but resolute. Yes, I've done this the entire time we've been together. You turn me on so much that I can't go without a day or two is fine. But beyond that, I needed an outlet that's all that ever was physical. I've never had feelings for any of them. The only man I've ever loved is you. When you told me this was your last business trip, I was overjoyed. I thought I wouldn't need second-rate substitutes anymore, because I have the best at home. Her voice cracked, and she looked away for a moment before finishing. The irony is, what might have been my last time with someone else turned out to be the time I got caught. Your last time. Skeptically, those photos are from Monday. You said you can't go more than 2 days without ZEX. Do you expect me to believe you didn't go out Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday? She chuckled lightly on Tuesday. He called to say he was back at the hotel, but he started bad-mouthing you again. I told him it was over, and I wouldn't see him later. He called to apologize. I forgave him, but said it was done for the night. We planned to meet on Wednesday. Even offered to take me to dinner as an apology. So the call you got on Tuesday, while we were talking, wasn't from your mom for the first time. She looked genuinely guilty. No, it wasn't her, she said softly. I hated lying to you. Not enough to stop doing it. I replied coldly. Her eyes widened. Wait, you called me Jules. During that call, I remember thinking it was odd. Did you already know then the photos were sent to me? Tuesday morning, I explained, along with transcripts of earlier calls. She sighed heavily. I'm so sorry. You had to find out like this. It must have been awful. Stay on track. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Firmly, you didn't see him Tuesday, but what about the rest of the week? Her expression shifted and she nodded slightly. We were supposed to have dinner Wednesday night, she admitted. You mean when you were supposedly watching your show? I asked with thinly veiled sarcasm. I really did watch. It's a good series. But I wasn't fully focused. She confessed that evening. Meeting him was just fulfilling a physical need for me. It was like going out for lunch with a friend. I need to eat. And if you're not there, I'll go with someone else. I know it's hard for you to understand, but that's how I viewed it. And I never called it making love. That's something I've only done with you stalling. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Bluntly, stop dancing around. What actually happened? Wednesday. I'm not stalling. Her tone defensive. As I said, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but he never showed. I waited at the restaurant for 45 minutes. I was furious. I've never been stood up before, so I went to his hotel. His car was in the parking lot, so I knew he was there, but he didn't answer the door. I asked the manager to open it, and we found him face down in his steak, dead as a worm. The doctors said he'd been taking blood pressure meds and mixed them with Viagra, which you should never do. It probably caused a massive heart attack back. Well, I said, at least he didn't die while he was entertaining. You that would have been inconvenient. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she chuckled. Bitterly. I never thought of that. It would have caused such a mess. His pure wife would have found out everything. I think she already knew. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I suspect she's the one who sent me the photos. Sophia nodded slowly. At least, I don't have to wonder if you'll be seeing him again, I remarked. And she gave a faint, a wise smile. I won't apologize for what I did. It was something I needed to do. But I am deeply sorry for hurting you, and for the way you found out. I was counting the days until your business trips ended, so I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But, as long as you kept leaving, I knew it would continue. All I could do was minimize the risks and hope that if you ever found out your love for me would be strong enough to understand. Why did it end till you just come to me? We could have worked something out. I could have handled things differently. Maybe even taking you with me on trips. She shook her head. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who nitpicks about how you provide the lifestyle. We have. You love your work. And we've had an amazing life together. I didn't plan this. It just happened by the time I realized how far it had gone. It was too late to take it back. I stared at her for a long time, lost in thought. So she finally asked, what happens now? I stood and went to the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine, pouring us each a glass. I set the bottle on the table and handed her one. I sat back down and drained half of mine in one gulp. I don't know. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Honestly, I need to think carefully. We've been together for so long I thought you loved me, as much as I loved you. Yes, we had a great bed life. And yes, we were intimate often, but you weren't the only one who struggled when I left. I also went without the eats for weeks, even months. I had opportunities to have lunch with other women, but I stayed true to our vows. I can't understand how you could let your physical need override everything. Our promises, our marriage, our life together. Was it just for ZEX? Are you going to claim some kind of ZEX dependence? Do we need to send you to therapy? She started to speak, but I raised a hand. No, please. Let me finish. I let you explain. So, give me the same courtesy. I refilled her glass and then mine. I have so many questions. How can you separate the ex and love so easily? I always thought men were the ones who could do that. Not women. If you're being honest about not loving any of them, then you risked everything for bad. ZEX, how do you think that makes me feel? And what about the future? Men's drives decrease with age, while some women's increase. Am I supposed to come home one day and find some young guy in our bed? Because I can't keep up. How can I live with myself? Knowing marriage was a lie dozens, maybe hundreds of men, over the years. You say you got tested, but that doesn't eliminate the risk. You could have given me something deadly. IV even. You could have eliminated us both. Where would that leave our children? Her face tightened and she began, absent-mindedly, rubbing her left arm. I smiled grimly. Thomas was a piece of trash. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But he caught feelings for you. He told me. He even cancelled dates with other women whenever you called. Her eyes widened in shock. When did you talk to Thomas? Oh, I said, my tone chilling. We had a chat the night. He died. I wanted to make sure you'd never see him again. Panic crept into her face. What did you do to him? Her voice, trembling. I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. What happened to him was a consequence of his actions. And now you understand the price of betrayal. I sat there in silence after my revelation, letting the weight of my words sink into the space between us. Sophia froze her face, an unreadable mask, but her hands trembled slightly, her fingers clutching the stem of her wine glass as though it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and in that moment, I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. Not fear of the truth, but fear of what I might do next. I've given you everything, I continued, my voice steady and devoid of the anger. I thought I'd feel a home, a family, a life you said you wanted, and yet it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing her before she could form an excuse. Don't you dare try to justify this anymore. You've said your piece, and I've listened, but now I need you to listen. I stood and began to pace the wine in my glass, so seemed dangerously close to the edge. You know, it's funny all these years. I was the one living a lie. My job, my secrets, they were my burden to bear alone. I justified it because I told myself I was protecting you, protecting us. But the real lie wasn't my work. It was this. Us, this marriage. This illusion of trust and loyalty. You've so carefully constructed while systematically tearing it apart. Her tears began to fall. Then silent streams down her face that she didn't bother to wipe away. But I felt nothing for them. No sympathy. No regret. No pity. Just a hollow ache where love had once been. I've eliminated men for less. Sophia. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The words escaping before. I could stop them. Her gasp was audible, a sharp intake of breath that seemed to echo in the stillness. And yet here, you were sitting across from me alive. And well, do you know why? She shook her head, her lips trembling too much to form a coherent answer because I'm tired. I admitted, barely above a whisper, tired of the lies, the betrayal, the endless cycle of hurt. Eliminating. You might bring me satisfaction in the moment, but it wouldn't fix what's already broken. It wouldn't undo the years of deception or the pain of realizing I've been a fool. And most of all, it wouldn't heal the damage you've done to our family. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She broke down completely, her sobs wrecking her body as she buried her face in her hands. I watched her crumble, unmoved by her display of guilt or sorrow in the past. I might have rushed to comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be okay. But not this time. I'm leaving. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Simply, the finality of the words hanging in the air. She looked up, her tear, stray face, a portrait of desperation and disbelief. You can't, she whispered, her voice hoarse. What about the kids? What about us? There is no us, I replied coldly. Not anymore. As for the kids, They're adults. Now, they'll understand in time. And they'll still have you at least until they find out who you really are. But me, I can't stay. I won't. I set my glass down on the table with a deliberate motion. The sound of the glass mating would punctuating my decision. I'll be gone by morning. You'll hear from my lawyer soon enough. Until then, consider this your warning. Don't follow me. Don't call. Don't try to find me. Because if you do, dear, I'll show you just how far my patience can stretch. Her sobs grew louder as I walked away, leaving her alone with her shattered world. Upstairs, I packed a single bag. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Only the rest could stay. I had no use for the trappings of a life that no longer felt like mine by the time the sun began to rise. I was already on the road, the villa shrinking in my rearview mirror, until it was nothing more than a memory. A part of me wanted to look back to see if she was standing in the doorway, watching me leave. But I didn't. I couldn't, because the man I'd been, the husband, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The fool was gone, and in his place was someone new, someone free. The road stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities. For the first time in years I felt the faint stirrings of hope. Not for redemption. No, that was a luxury I didn't deserve. But for something simpler, something purer, a chance to start over. And so I drove, leaving behind the wreckage of a life that was never truly mine. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would face it on my own terms, free from the shadows of betrayal and deceit, for better or worse. This was my story now, and it was far from over. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.